We hear so many warnings about AI, but what about the rules that are actually supposed to keep us safe? Well, the most famous of all are Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. For decades, they've been this cornerstone of science fiction. But now that AI is becoming a reality, we really have to ask, are they actually strong enough to work?
To really get how visionary this was, just think about the year, 1942. This was before most people even had a TV, let alone a computer. And yet, Asimov was already thinking deeply about the ethics of artificial intelligence. I mean, that is just an incredibly forward-thinking concept.
And here are the laws themselves. They're built on this really elegant hierarchy. The first law, don't harm humans, is the absolute bedrock. The second law, obedience, well, that comes second to the first. And the third law, self-preservation, is dead last. It has to give way to the other two. So you end up with this really neat, logical pyramid of morality.
On the surface, it seems totally foolproof. A perfect safety net, right? But as we start moving from sci-fi novels to actual AI in our daily lives, you have to ask, do these laws really hold up under pressure? Can they truly be the foundation for a moral machine?
Okay, so the first major crack in this whole foundation appears the moment you try to actually program these laws. And it all starts with that very first, most important word. The challenge becomes crystal clear when you compare different kinds of concepts. It's pretty easy to teach a computer about geometry or compound interest, right? These things have precise mathematical definitions. But harm or justice, these are deeply complex, subjective human ideas. There's no simple formula for that.
And this leads to a massive problem. If you can't give an AI a universal, ironclad definition of harm that covers every possible situation, from a paper cut to emotional trauma, then the entire first law basically becomes useless. It's a rule that's based on a word the computer can't ever truly understand.
But okay, let's just pretend for a second. Let's say we could solve the programming problem. Well, that just leads us to an even thornier issue: the rigid, absolute nature of the laws themselves. Let's look at that first law again. A robot may not injure a human being. Just notice the wording there. It is absolute. There are no exceptions, no what-ifs, no footnotes. It is designed from the ground up to be an unbreakable rule. And this is where it all gets really complicated. What if a robot is the only thing that can stop a sniper from harming a crowd of people? Well, according to the first law, the robot cannot act if it means injuring that sniper, so it must, through inaction, allow the crowd to come to harm, just to avoid harming that one individual. It's a complete paradox. You see, in fields like the military or law enforcement, the whole point might be for a robot to use force to prevent an even greater harm. In those critical situations, Asimov's first law isn't a safeguard at all. It's actually a liability.
And that brings us to the third and maybe the most philosophical problem with the laws. This isn't about programming or battlefield ethics. This is about the status of the robots themselves.
This is such a powerful way to frame the issue. The laws, by their very design, enforce a master-servant relationship. A robot's own existence, its autonomy, is always secondary to what a human wants or needs. They're basically created to be a subservient class. Now, with today's technology, this might not seem like a huge deal. But what happens down the road? As AI gets more and more advanced, as machines get closer to something like consciousness or real intelligence, is it ethical to bind them with a code that enforces their slavery by default? Is that fair? So after poking all these holes in Asimov's laws, you might be thinking we just need a better set of rules. But the final and most profound problem isn't about finding the perfect code for the machine. It's about looking at the code we run on ourselves. Ultimately, the problem isn't just Asimov's laws. The deeper issue is that we can't give AI a perfect moral code because we, as humanity, don't have one. Our own ethics are constantly being debated, contested, and they're always evolving. There is no single, universally accepted ethical operating system for humans that we can just copy and paste. I mean, just take slavery as a really stark example. In the 17th century, it was legal, and in many places seen as morally acceptable. But today, it is globally condemned as a crime against humanity. Our own fundamental ethics have done a complete 180 in just a few centuries. So we would never want to hard code 17th century morality into a modern AI, right? But that forces us to ask a really humbling question. What makes us so sure that our 21st century morality is the final, perfected version? Why would we risk shackling a potentially immortal intelligence with our own temporary and flawed ethics?
And that is the ultimate challenge. Asimov's laws were a brilliant attempt to create a fixed moral compass for machines. But maybe the real task isn't to teach AI a static set of rules, but to figure out how it can learn and evolve its ethics right alongside a species that is still very much trying to figure out its own. What do you think?